And happy Saturday and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, November 16, 2024, and we are still in recovery mode. The shockwave of Donald Trump returning to D.C. Is, I think, the wave is just starting to move across the ocean, and it hasn't crashed yet, but we see some bad signs in there. And of course, I need somebody to talk to about it. And Val Atkinson is here. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed.
Well, I'll start off by saying that I'm not surprised by some of the things that are occurring in the transition here. Donald Trump went to meet with Joe Biden at the White House. Um, as cordial as it could be, considering they hate each other for good reason. But Joe Biden is committed to this peaceful transition thing. Um, One of the things that Democrats, I think, uh, still have to, I think, deal with in the long run is that sometimes they're too damn nice, and they're always in this mode of bipartisanship and wanting to be nice all the time, and that extends to this here. Because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they're going to be up on the dais for the transition, the handover, because they want to prove that Democrats are somehow different and peaceful. The Republicans didn't have to do that, and it cost them nothing, Val. And all these people who have been convicted of 1-6 violations will probably get pardoned. At least a lot of them probably will. So let's start with we did a postmortem. We talked about some of the things that may have gone wrong in the campaign. One of them, I think, is that Kamala just didn't have enough time, but there was a lot of money, dark money in the background, and there were ads in North Carolina about menthol cigarettes and all kind of other stuff. They tried to get to young black men, and so let's start there. When we left off the last time, we were talking about we weren't sure how much the numbers were going to reflect how many black men voted for Donald Trump. It turned out to be about what they had estimated, but the Hispanic men and then the folks in places like Dearborn, Michigan, where there was large Muslim populations, tipped the balance in some of those swing states, and in Pennsylvania, where there were a lot of Puerto Ricans you thought would have been pissed off about the Puerto Rican comment. They weren't. They were more concerned about some of those issues where Trump was saying that Joe Biden had ruined the economy when he hadn't. That's a long windup, but in the almost 2 weeks now we had to reflect. Have you changed any of your thoughts about why it turned out the way it did, and what do you expect the Democrats to be doing at least in the short term to try to be ready for the midterm elections in 26?
Well, I'm still waiting to see the final shoe drop on the demographic dispersion of first turnout and then for whom did they cast their ballot, because that's going to tell me where we really need to go from this point. I'm always interested in performance, voter performance. I remember in one of our banner years, I believe it was 2012, it may have been 2008, I'm not sure, but Black North Carolinians outperformed white North Carolinians. When I said outperform, I don't mean they outvoted them, because we only make up about 21% of the population in North Carolina, African Americans. But I'm saying that the percentage of registered Black voters that actually turned out to vote was a higher percentage than the registered white voters that actually turn out to vote. That's what we're talking about when we talk about performance. Did you perform well based on your numbers as far as voter registration is concerned? That's the number I want to start with. Then I want to break that down into its various component parts, such as race and gender and educational level, and maybe even we can talk about income and that sort of thing, to find out who these people are that voted, who these people are that voted Democrat, who these people are that voted Republican. That's how we get a good, firm hold on actually who did what, where the performance is. And we don't run the risk of mislabeling the fault when we start doing our postmortem and our autopsy of this particular election. I remember in 1992, we did it badly. Uh, the senator from Duke University, Stanford, that was our sitting senator. And we lost him in that 1992 race where Bill Clinton won. And a lot of the pundits and strategists for the Democratic Party wanted to blame the black vote, wanted to say blacks didn't turn out. That's why Stanford lost. Well, the facts did not support that. When I ran the numbers, because I was at the party at that time, I was deputy director for the coordinated campaign, handling the black side of everything. When I ran all of the numbers, we outperformed the expectations. We didn't outperform the white vote, but we outperformed expectations because in the beginning, we wanted to beat the 1988 turnout for African Americans in North Carolina. We beat 1998, 1988, and 1984, and 1980, all of the Reagan years. We beat that in 1992. So I just go and say all of that to make sure that we don't just grab onto one set of statistics and grab one demographic and blame or exonerate that person or that group when we need to look at the totality of things to find out what's going on. And I'm still a little bit away from determining who did what or who did not do what in this particular race. I do know that Hispanic men voted in larger numbers than they had in the past, and many of them cast their ballots for Donald Trump for whatever reason. And there was a small uptick in African Americans who voted, African American men who voted for the Republican ticket by a huge number because of black women. African Americans voted for Kamala Harris, is without a doubt. So we got to find out who these black men were. Were they college educated? Were they first-time voters? Were they young? Were between 18 and 38? Were they senior citizens drawing Social Security? Who were these people that we're talking about now? And so, because you got to know all of that before you formulate a strategy as to what are we going to do to block that from repeating the next time? How are we going to make corrective actions? And having been where I was with the Democratic Party here in North Carolina, I know that's one of the biggest mistakes we made. First of all, fighting like a general fighting the last war and his planning. He already lost that last war. And instead of preparing for the new war coming up, he's taking a look at the last one and making sure that doesn't happen again. So we've got to make sure that our planning is for 2026 and 2028. We got to close the page on 2024 because you can't go back to 2024 again. I don't care how hard you try. So we've got a lot of soul searching to do, a lot of introspection, and before we move forward. And there's a lot of things, and I know you're going to get to some of them in the show this morning, that we can talk about to prepare ourselves for 26 and 28 without getting in this kind of malaise and lingering back and being forlorn and pissed off and sad about what happened in 24. Close the book. Ain't a damn thing you can do about that now.
No, it's not. I want to remind you, you're either watching or listening to the deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. Not really a post-mortem here, but, sort of a where we go from here kind of discussion. But I do want to talk a bit about, I've seen these news stories over the last couple of days about a voter's remorse, that people saying, oh, I didn't know what a tariff was, or you can be denaturalized as a citizen or whatever. So let's take a look at the clip and then we'll talk about it.
Gelacio Velasquez is an undocumented mechanic who has worked in Houston for 25 years.
Oh.
He plays in this park with his two U.S. citizen children, ages 5 and 9, and stands by Donald Trump.
So you support Donald Trump because of the economy?
For the economy, yes.
But you don't support the anti-immigrant rhetoric?
I'm not support the anti-immigrant action.
Do you support his mass deportations?
No, it's not human.
Are you afraid that you could be deported in this mass deportation?
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.
Espinosa runs a migrant advocacy group and says many people are afraid and have called him in tears.
I think there's a heightened sense of fear.
Explain why Latino men are going to Trump.
Democrats forget the promise when these guys are in the office in Washington. The Latinos want a better nation.
Espinosa believes some of the Latino support for Trump was a vote against the prospect of the first black female president.
So, Val, that's a Hispanic man who said that he voted for Donald Trump, and he voted for him because he wanted to get rid of the bad Hispanics. And then when the reporter says, well, you know, that's not exactly what they've said. And so he looked a bit forlorn after that. I expect there is some voters' remorse with some folks because the Google searches said that people were looking for what is a tariff, and it spiked dramatically afterwards when all the news stories started talking about that tariffs actually get applied to people, you know, when they're trying to buy shit, not the people who are manufacturing stuff, and that people could be denaturalized. So let's talk. I got a media politics question for you, since that's one of your expertise as a former professor at North Carolina Central University. When you saw the reporting in the run up to Election Day, where people got news from, was there any outlets that would have reached those people to give them truly what a tariff was, or truly that there could be denaturalization? Because a lot of people listen to morning drive time radio, or they on the internet getting those little snippets on TikTok or whatever, and they're not sitting down watching a long form news program. So I guess my question is, have we shifted so far away from people picking up the morning newspaper and getting, you know, a long story about something, or tuning into one of these cable news programs to get, you know, detailed information, that our attention spans are so short that there's no place for people to get real information from?
I think it's the latter, Ed. Our attention span is so short, we're so tethered to our devices that we are looking for the truth out of that smartphone. And the people who are using the social media to control us with disinformation and misinformation, they know that's where we're going to look. They know what is going on. So they get our attention by throwing in things like Jay-Z's got a new piece out. Jay-Z and the Super Bowl, anything about Jay-Z and Beyonce or whatever, they know this group of people are going to go to that first. And then when they get you to come there, then they're going to talk about how bad the economy is, how large a percentage eggs have risen over the past few months or whatever. And Donald Trump is going to do something about that. It ain't like it was, Ed, when you and I were in a different age group, where we could look at CBS, NBC, ABC, and get the news from some of our media godfathers like Walter Cronkite, and or pick up a newspaper and read something out of the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Durham Herald or the NNO or the Baltimore Sun or whatever newspaper you read. Now people get that information from their devices, from a lot of other places, and it's not your typical place that we would normally look for real, vetted, decent research news, okay? So we've got a big problem as far as that's concerned, because you and I can research and do all of the things we want, but if there's nobody out there listening, because we're not doing it on a device somewhere, not coming through on a device, that is problematic. Because the next guy, the Trump 2.0, is going to use that same playbook that he has seen that has been successful for Donald Trump. And it's through the devices, anything that's against them, they call it fake news. They got entities such as Russia and other people pouring disinformation, feeding disinformation through a fire hose to African Americans and Hispanic Americans and getting them confused and voting for the wrong candidate in terms of what's in their best interest for them and their families. So that is going to continue. Our big battle is with social media, devices, and other things. The camel's nose under the tent, and here's a little bright spot here, may be how some of our educational institutions have started playing with the idea of setting policy about how long you can have the kids can have devices in school, and if they can have them there, and what they can be used for. That's the nose under the tent that we are getting to a point where we can control devices and social media instead of our devices and social media controlling us.
Yeah, I just have a fear, Val, though, that the horse is out of the gate, and trying to reel some of this back in, because one of the things I did, speaking of reading the newspaper, I read the Washington Post, and they had a really good article about how Elon Musk used dark money to fund a lot of ads in a lot of these states. And one of the ads they funded in North Carolina, where we live, is one about menthol cigarettes that said Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were after your menthol cigarettes. And it played over and over on black radio. Now, if you can siphon off a couple thousand people, with that, but the other ad they played was the one about Kamala locked up a lot of black men. And so those two things persisted in the minds of, say, maybe 20,000 black men, and swayed them to vote the other way. Because when you look at the number again in North Carolina, Kamala lost by a little shade under 200,000 votes. And then on the Hispanic radio, which we don't listen to, however, the ad over there was that that there were these other illegals that they were going to go after, not you. And so that was the thing that swayed them. So you get 20,000 here and 20,000 there, and then you get the people who voted for Jill Stein and the other third parties. You easily come up with the 180,000 votes that Kamala lost by. And you do that in Wisconsin, you do it. And so the article in the Post talked about how because of Citizens United, a case we've talked about a lot, over the last decade now, this dark money is untraceable unless they want to be traced. And Elon Musk made no secret that he was funneling millions of dollars a week into the campaign because he has the millions to do it. Anyway, I hear some music in my ear. When we come back, Val, I want to talk some brass tacks, some of these crazy people that Donald Trump are nominating for cabinet positions and what the upshot of that is. But I also want to talk about, again, the real reason why we find ourselves in this position. There's something that happened in 1898 that's related to why we're at the place we are as black folks in the United States. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Rumors and misleading information can spread quickly after any disaster. Following Hurricanes Milton, Helene, and Debbie, FEMA has seen many rumors that have the potential to seriously hamper storm response efforts or prevent people from getting assistance quickly. Help keep yourself, your family, and your community safe by being aware of rumors and scams, as well as sharing information from trusted sources. You can get official information on FEMA.gov by searching Hurricane Rumor Response.
and happy Saturday, and welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, November 16, 2024. In the first segment, we were trying to figure out not what happened, but just put some context to where we are right now in some possibilities that the Democrats need to consider when they form their strategy for 26, 28, and beyond. When we left, Val, I said that we were going to talk about the idiocy of the appointments over on the Trump transition side. But I'm going to lay that aside for just a second, because there was a documentary that premiered on PBS on the American Experience. It's called American Coup, Wilmington, 1898. And for people in North Carolina, I don't even think we have a good sense of what happened. You do and I do, but a lot of people don't. Wilmington, North Carolina was the most populous city in North Carolina in 1898. It was the most prosperous city, but it had what they call a fusion government, Val. Negroes were in the government and substantially in the government, and were substantial property owners and business owners and so on and so forth. And the white supremacists and nationalists said, hell no, we can't have the most populous city, the richest city, run by Negroes. So they decided that they were going to end Negro rule, is what they call it, right? And there was an actual coup. So the only coup that in the United States history where a duly elected government was overthrown. And the reason why I bring that up, because it's the anniversary of it, for one, and in that documentary, I will encourage people to go and take a look at it on PBS, on American Experience. It's streaming for the next couple years for free if you want to watch it, Val. But the reason why I bring it up is, and we've talked about it often over the almost 40 years that I've known you, that some white folks are just scared of Negroes. Now, they love to see you play basketball. They'll go to a UNC game or Duke game and cheer, yay, yay, Negro, yay, Negro. But if you try to run for office, or you are something other than an athlete or entertainer, then you have less value. So let's start there, Val. Deconstruct for me where this fear of the Negro is in 2024, because I think it manifests in something that happened in North Carolina, because there was a Negro who ran for governor on the Republican side who was a staunch Donald Trump supporter, but he got completely clobbered by the Jewish guy, which seems, hard to believe in North Carolina. Tell me about what happened to Mr. Mark Robinson and how this plays into fear of Negro.
Well, Mark Robinson lost primarily because of a campaign that the Democrats successfully ran to paint him of being totally extreme, way, way beyond the pale. Even as I was traveling, I traveled around to see my grandkids and friends in other states. That's the first thing they asked me when I told them I was from North Carolina. They said, who is this guy, Mark Robinson? And then I have to spend the next 5 or 10 minutes explaining to them what I knew, which was not a whole lot at that time. When I was with the Democratic Party, was to ensure that the black candidates, Ralph Campbell, Eva Clayton, and Mel Watt, got elected. Ralph Campbell was running for the first African-American to be on the Council of State in North Carolina. That was number one. Of course, the other two, Mel Watt and Eva Clayton, were running for Congress. But white folks voted for Ralph Campbell to become the first African-American to serve on the Council of State in this post-Jim Crow era. And so they will do that. But in a case like Mark Robinson, which we were talking about, Mark did not have the prerequisite that they were looking for that made them say, okay, I'll vote for this guy because he will or won't do this. Hell, the governor touches everything. So we got to be very careful about putting him in office. And he was too toxic he was radioactive, and they just couldn't see themselves voting for him. And white voters in North Carolina are the supermajority by far, and without them, you can't win anything. So when a few of them turned against him, that was a big issue. But the main thing, when you are black and you are running for election in North Carolina that has 20% plus black population, and most of that 20% won't vote for you, it is almost impossible to win. And that's where he found himself because of a hole that he dug, actually. But the numbers were against him. Black folks did not turn out and vote for a black candidate. And without that, there's no chance of winning.
So here's the other part to that, Val. You know, Herschel Walker has found himself in that spot before. Herman Cain died on behalf of Donald Trump when he got COVID, so on and so forth. And then we saw a lot of black evangelicals, a Byron Donalds, a Tim Scott. Tim Scott even had to go get him a white wife to try to, you know, cover for his whatever, and take it however you want to take it. What I'm saying here, yeah, I think you know what I'm saying.
Yes, yes.
But anyway, all that being said, there will still be black folks like a Mark Robinson that go that direction, right? In because of seeking acceptance or whatever, or I don't know, maybe some people actually believe that they're doing the right thing. I don't think they believe it, but they say they believe it, right? So in terms of there'll always be those people, I guess, at least one or two all the time, right? But there's also going to be this pool of American, the American religion of white people were destined to take over this land because the Native Americans didn't deserve it for whatever reason, which is essentially Mormonism. And then you also have this other piece that we can have black folks around us, but only to a certain degree.
And that goes back, Ed, to how you started this whole piece when you said, well, why are they afraid of us? Or why is it that they won't vote for us? And we touched on just a little bit of why they will vote with us and for us in certain instances and on certain occasions. But I think the whole thing started with the fear that certain white folks have of black African Americans. It goes back to slavery. It even goes back to the pre-1619 era, when people were enslaved and in fear that there was going to be a slave revolt or uprising, and they would kill all of the white landowners, because in many, many cases, there would be a plantation that would have more slaves on that plantation than they would white people. So the fear was there. So the only thing they had going for themselves was that they had all of the weapons, and they would put the fear of God in the slaves to say, if you try to run away or if you attack a white man, this is what happened. So they would have the public hangings and the flogging and all of this stuff to put fear in the hearts and minds of those who are left behind. So that's how it all got started. And it still comes around today that there are many whites who fear black people. And I could tell you tons of stories about things that have happened to me in my life, Ed, and still happening today, that shows me that African Americans, and I live in a very safe community, a little small town in Wake County, North Carolina, called Holly Springs. And there are examples of people still being afraid of African Americans. African Americans, when I moved down here, Ed, were 16% of the population. It is now 9%. So we're moving in the other direction. And there are still white folks who are afraid of Black people. So that's not going to change anytime soon. So that fear causes them to enact policies, put systems in place that protect them. They were born of fear. When you talk about this hemisphere of the world, Ed, when they came here, there were the Native Americans. They were afraid of them. They brought Africans here to work the land. They were afraid of them. There were people down to the south of them called Mexicans and Middle Americans and South Americans. They were afraid of them. They have been afraid of something or somebody their whole existence in the Western Hemisphere, and it ain't changed. They're always afraid because of their solitude and loneliness and the minimalist of being white. And a number I throw out a lot and talk to, that it is estimated, and that's why I'm going to give this big, long estimate, that between 11 and 15% of the world's population are comprised by white people. Say it another way. White people only make up between 11 and 15% of the population of planet Earth. So that means the other 85 to 89% are people of color. That scares the bejesus out of all of them. They're afraid. They're afraid, Ed, that if something goes down and things turn around, they are going to be enslaved, or push comes to shove, if they allow intermarriage and interracial dating and all of that, because they have recessive genes, and they start making unions with people of color. If you have somebody from South Sudan and somebody from England that was born and raised, and they make a baby, it's not going to come out with blonde hair and blue eyes most of the time. So they're afraid of that. So they live in perpetual fear of being erased or controlled on this planet by people who don't look like them.
Yeah.
And the culprit is us, because we are the exact polar opposite from them. We are the Black, they are the white. And they live in a state of perpetual fear. When you get into abject fear, as far as you can go, as scared as you can get, we talk about the cat in the corner. What will it do? It will come out of that corner and fight a dinosaur. It doesn't matter who's in front of it. And that's where white folks are in some cases. They have abject fear, which has morphed into aggression.
Yeah.
They have become aggressive in protecting themselves against the other. And I don't know how they get out of it. I really don't.
Yeah, so one of the problems, Val, and we'll end the segment on this, is that it manifests itself in somebody like Donald Trump emerging, but not just Donald Trump, but the people he brings along with him. And one of those people is Stephen Miller, who attended Duke University in lovely Durham, North Carolina. Let's take a look at Stephen Miller, and then we'll talk about it and wrap this segment up.
It's a requirement that to be naturalized, you had to speak English. So the notion that speaking English wouldn't be a part of our immigration systems would be actually very ahistorical. Secondly, I don't want to get off into a whole thing about history here, but the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of liberty enlightening the world. It's a symbol of American liberty lighting the world. The poem that you're referring to that was added later is not actually part of the original Statue of Liberty, but more fundamentally, the history, but more fundamentally,
you're saying
the
that
history
does not represent.
I'm saying that the notion. I'm saying the notion that I'm saying the notion.
Stephen, I'm sorry.
No,
Jim.
Let me ask you a question.
That sounds like some national park revisionism.
No, what I'm asking you is,
the Statue of Liberty
Jim,
has always been
let me ask you a question.
Of hope to the world.
Jim,
for people to send.
Jim, do you believe
people to this country?
Jim,
and they're not always going to speak English, Stephen.
Jim,
they're not
do you
always
believe
going to be highly skilled. They're not always going to be.
Jim, I appreciate your speech. speech, Jim. I appreciate your speech. So let's talk about this.
It was a modest.
Jim, let's talk about this. In 1970, when we let in 300,000 people a year, was that violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land? In the 1990s, when it was 500,000 a year, was it violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land?
Was it violating?
When it was 700,000 a year. No, tell me what years. Tell me what years. Tell me what years meet. Tell me what years meet Jim Acosta's definition of the Statue of Liberty poem law of the land. So you're saying 1 million a year is the Statue of Liberty number.
So Val, Stephen Miller is confrontational. He says provocative stuff. He's also Jewish by ethnicity. His family is Jewish. However, he eschewed that Judaism when he was in high school, and by all accounts, he did it to sort of fit into a persona. He was at a liberal high school and he wanted to stand out, so he took on this persona of being anti everything from the time he was 16, 17 years old. By the time he ends up at Duke University, the Duke lacrosse case is happening, and it does not become a national story until Stephen Miller and the Duke Chronicle make it a national story, because they say that the story was about a black woman who hated white men, and it was about this thing against white men, when in fact the black woman had biracial children from a white husband that did not get out into the news. Now, we can talk about that at some other point, because we both know a lot about that story for a lot of different reasons. But this is more about Stephen Miller and why he gets picked by Donald Trump, because Donald Trump knows that Stephen Miller is one of those experts at being able to navigate into that population. He can find disaffected young white men and tell them that they're being usurped by these other people, and what we got to do is protect ourselves. We also got to protect our white women. And the irony is that he ain't even one of them, which is really weird to me. It's
well,
like,
Hitler was an Austrian.
Yeah, right. But it's like having, the archetypal, black slave who goes, "Oh, master, we sick," and that stereotype, right, of that kind of house Negro, so to speak, and then also maybe of a Jewish guard at a concentration camp. It's an oxymoron, right? It makes no sense. You can't square it. But Stephen Miller is one of those people. Now he's a senior aide to Donald Trump and helping him making some of these selections and picks on who is going to be running the government, which is, I think, the bigger thing we need to fear is, will some of these nominations stick? So I hear some music in my ear. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to wrap this up, because we're going to talk about these picks and why I think he made some of them. Because if you say that he's not serious about the picks, I think he's serious about every one of them. But what I would say is he's also cynical too, and we'll talk about that when we come back.
We've been here before.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
And when President Trump came for our rights, the ACLU showed up.
The ACLU has filed over a dozen cases on the travel ban thus far.
I mean, people are turning out still in these protests. They're still going on at the airports, these spontaneous protests. At the courthouse, when we won our case, they're activated in a way that's remarkable.
If you ask, will we fight? Yes, we will fight!
This is not President Trump's America. It's ours. Mr. President-elect, we'll see you in courts, in Congress, in state houses, and in the streets. It's
Donald John Trump.
Trump.
today to authoritatively express that President Trump did not commit an insurrection, and we believe Congress has a unique role in making that declaration. It's not the job of the states, and especially not the job of some bureaucrats in Colorado, to make this assessment and interfere with the rights of voters to cast their vote for the candidate of their choice. The very experts who often get on television and talk about securing democracy seem to be the first to want to then remove a candidate from the ballot because they are afraid that he is too popular. We have 63 co-sponsors to the resolution that Ms. Stefanik and I will be filing today to express the sense of Congress that President Trump did not commit an insurrection.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We've been not trying to cause a panic or anything like that. I've watched a lot of shows, Val, where the Democratic panelists are, pretty much on the floor and rolling around and in a panic because they feel like, the world's coming to an end. What I will say is I don't like anything that happened. But what I will say is that it ain't nothing new. We used to be slaves.
Right.
We lived under Jim Crow. We lived in segregation. We lived in substandard housing and all that other stuff. I would tell people all the time, there's a really good book. It's very dense, but it's a study of poverty in North Carolina in 1968. And it was put out by a professor at the University of North Carolina. And I can't remember the name of the book, but I still have a copy of it. And I remember reading it. And the number of people who lived in abject poverty in the Black community was almost 70% in North Carolina. Because on the books, up until the late 60s, it was even against the law in some factories for African Americans to run the looms to make fabric, which was a big deal in North Carolina. They could work in the plant, but there was laws that said you could not run the loom, right? So that meant that your salary was capped because you could only do manual labor and that kind of thing. Most of the other people in North Carolina were working as farm laborers. And it was not uncommon into the 70s to be paid $4 or $5 a day for your labor. So in the span of these 50 years or so, Black folks have made tremendous progress. And it isn't because of handouts or anything like that. It's because we have worked our way out of this like we've been working our way out of it for the last 400 years, Val. Yes. But some people don't have to work at all. And one of those people is Matt Gaetz. So let's take a look at this clip, and then we'll talk about Mr. Matt Gaetz. Val, Matt Gaetz has been accused of having sex with minors, paying them money or giving them drugs, plying them with drugs, taking them over the state lines. I guess there are laws against taking minors over the state line, particularly for sex. And there was an ethics investigation in the House of Representatives, and one Kevin McCarthy, who you saw in that clip, used to be the speaker. And Kevin McCarthy says, everybody knows that Matt Gaetz had sex with minors because he would show pictures on the floor of the House bragging about these girls. Donald Trump nominated him to be the Attorney General of the United States. And this man is under a serious ethics investigation. And we all the time hear that, Bill Clinton was horrible because he had a tryst with Monica Lewinsky, and they actually moved to impeach him. But they want to make this other guy the Attorney General. Val, help me make some sense about what Donald Trump's real modus operandi is in his selections of his cabinet picks.
Well, I can do it best by telling you that this whole thing is about money, not policy. And it's about power, not ideology. Democrats think that they can attack Republicans on policy issues when all Trump and his boys care about is money. They also think that Trump and his surrogates ideological focus when they're really driven by power retention. Is all they want to do is retain power. In other words, it's nothing new under a Trump type of plan. If it's going to give them power, if it's going to make more money in the long run, they embrace that. And if they have to lie about policy, if they have to change their ideology or whatever, they don't care, because it's about making money and retaining power. And so they don't get into qualifications, making sense, not less it's like pennies and nickels, that kind of sense. But they don't care about being logical or truthful or factual. They don't care about those kind of things. And that's where Democrats, well, I'll use the word, waste their time and end up chasing after crazy stuff that ain't there. It's like you catch it and you open the box and it's nothing in it. And you said, damn, boy, I thought this is what I was chasing. It never has been anything in the box that you're chasing. And some people have been trying to tell you that stop chasing the box because it ain't nothing in it, but you still chase it because you got the facts, you know? So maybe the election of 2024, Ed, can be the thing that gets some of our Democratic operatives to stop chasing the box. You've been chasing the car stopped. And now you're wondering, what do I do with this car? I've been barking at the wheels. The wheel kept going round and round, and now the wheel stopped, and I don't know what to do. So now it's time for Democrats to do something different. Stop chasing the car. Stop opening empty boxes. Look, they are interested in money and power, not policy, okay? Not even ideology that sticks, okay? I think if the Democrats learn that, they would have learned one hell of a lesson, but it's still going to take some time because it's too deeply ingrained in our souls and in our daily lives, the way we approach everything. We are an intellectually savvy group, Ed, Democrats are, and we think that given the opportunity, we can explain anything to anybody in a way that will make them change their mind and see things our way.
Yeah. Well, you know, the one thing that I keep when I wake up in the morning having at least some positive feelings about is that I know that this is all cyclical too, right? Mm-hmm. That Jimmy Carter's elected, then you get Ronald Reagan and one term of Bush. Then you get Clinton for 8 years, and then you get another Bush. And then you get Obama for 8 years, and then you get a Trump for 4, and then a Biden for 4, and then another Trump, right? So the thing here is that historically, if you look, Republicans will F up the economy, Democrats fix it. But Republicans promise lower taxes for everybody, but only lower taxes for people who don't need it. A real interesting thing, Val, is another thing I saw in the Washington Post this morning. They were talking about how the Justice Department was trying to rush to fix some police accountability things that they wanted to put in place because they never were able to get the George Floyd Act in place and stuff like that. And one of the things that Trump had signaled is that he's okay with stop and frisk. He wants qualified immunity for police officers regardless, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Those are policies that hurt Black and brown men, right? Somehow they were able to have people overlook those things, right? And maybe Democrats should have been talking about some of those. If they were going to talk about policy, they should have not been talking about the economy or real dense economic things like what the inflation rate is and stuff like that. They may have been talking about some brass tack stuff like, will you be subject to stop and frisk? And if you get, injured or even killed, the police won't be responsible because of qualified immunity. I didn't hear those kind of conversations coming from the Democrats. And I'm wondering, in your assessment, would it have even made any dent at all if the Democrats change their strategy and stop talking about dense policy stuff or talking about inflation numbers and how inflation works and talk about, something real and tangible, like your ass is subject to getting beat because police will not have any controls over them anymore.
Now, I think until Democrats muster the nerve to talk about the real center core issue that Republicans have been running on for 50 years, then they're still going to have problems. And the real core center issue that Republicans have run on for the last 50, 60 years is race. We've got to dive right into that and talk about America's stance on race and racism that the whole world knows about. You can go to other countries and talk about what's the main central issue or problem in America, and they'll tell you it's race and racism. But Democrats don't like to approach that issue for some reason. They want to talk around it. They want to give examples and hope they can say sideways things and you will know what they're talking about and come up with the answer, just so they don't have to broach the subject directly in front of you. I don't know why we're so afraid to talk about that. But until we do, we're going to continue to get the same result because Republicans have perfected the dog whistle. They have really perfected that, and they talk about it without having to use the words, but they are kicking Democrats' butt on the issue of race. And it came to fruition and the light was turned on in 2024 election when Donald Trump won in places that nobody expected him to. Who before the election would have expected Donald Trump to win all 7 battleground states, all 7 of them?
Yeah.
Nobody expected them.
Yeah.
And the popular vote. They have perfected the dog whistle around race. And Democrats better start understanding that. How are they going to react? Democrats like to try to be all things to all people. They're afraid if they start talking about race, then some white folks are going to think that, well, you're in the bag for black folks and you don't like white people. Democratic Party ain't a place for white people. So Democrats don't talk about race. And they leave it up to the dog whistles in the Republican Party. And Republicans say, thank you very much. I'll take it.
Yeah, well, the other piece of this, Val, is that there are some people, Democratic strategists, been around a long time that want to harken back to Bill Clinton. They say, well, the success is in Bill Clinton, and that all you got to do is act more Republican, right? Which means not talking about race, which means, Bill Clinton spent all this time on welfare reform, which was code word for Negroes getting money that they didn't deserve, when in fact it was white folks in West Virginia and Indiana that were getting the money. And then when they didn't get it and they were harmed, you saw a policy creep back that allowed for food stamps, SNAP now, and things like that to be reinstated quietly, right? But because they couldn't use that as a cudgel anymore. They couldn't say welfare queen because Bill Clinton took that away from them and did welfare reform. The saw now is that DEI is the problem and wokeness is the problem. So in a lot of the postmortems from these older Democratic strategies, they say, oh, you can't talk woke anymore. I didn't hear anybody in the Harris campaign talk that at all, to tell you the truth. She was talking about owning a gun and all kind of other stuff. They were tacking as much to the right as they could without, crossing over. They had Liz Cheney on the stage, for God's sake, so Liz Cheney ain't woke. And so I guess the last piece of this, in your eyes, will these DCLC, the Democratic Leadership Council kind of folks from the Clinton era, will they ascend back into being in charge of these Democratic campaigns because people are afraid and they need to tack to the right? Will a James Carville and those people come back?
I hope they don't, Ed, because that was a bad move for those people who may not know what the DLC was, the Democratic Leadership Council, and it was founded by a gentleman by the name of Al Frum, From, look him up. And he felt that Democrats had moved too far to the left and needed to join Republicans and move a little bit right. So there were several senators and governors and representatives that joined his movement, and they chose a gentleman by the name of Bill Clinton and another guy by the name of Al Gore to run for president in 1992, and they won. And as soon as they got in, they enacted some of Al Frum's stuff, such as the three strike you out rule, welfare to work, as it was called. They signed legislation to bring back the death penalty across the board as far as federal death penalty is concerned. There was a hip hop rapper or whatever by the name of Sister Soldier that Bill Clinton really just embarrassed and refused to take it back, when all of the black people are saying you're insulting a whole genre of music loving people out there. You shouldn't do that. But the biggest one in my mind was him throwing Lonnie Guinier under the bus. He had nominated her for his attorney general. There were a couple of things that the investigation found that they didn't like. And most of the people that supported Lonnie Guinier said that's minor, she can still be confirmed. And he withdrew her name. Clinton withdrew her name and would not put it back on. And the entire African-American community was upset with that. Going along with the three strikes you out and the welfare to work and bringing back the death penalty, that was a little too much, you know. And some people, even within the party, and I'll say this and I'll go, Howard Dean said the DLC was the Republican wing of the Democratic Party. Jesse Jackson said that called the DLC the democracy for the leisure class. That was Jesse Jackson. So Jesse Jackson and Howard Dean were two people at the top who saying this DLC thing with Al Frum, it ain't getting it. But they thought it was the thing that got Bill Clinton elected, so they thought it was good. I'm saying if you bring it back again, you may win an election, but at some point, Democrats got to decide, are you in the business of just winning elections or getting things done for the people that you purport to be in support of? Are you about ideology and getting things done and righting wrongs, or you just want to win an election here and there? Because I think the Democrats, if they don't watch it, they're going to look around and their following ain't going to be there, because to these people who need help, Ed, they don't want to just win elections. They want to get things done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I think the lesson of Lonnie Guinier is that maybe you should sleep with minors and then you can get nominated and not have your name withdrawn. Val, there's so much more we could talk about. We could talk about RFK Jr., Kristi Noem, Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy being, assigned to this mythical department, with the Department of Government Efficiency that doesn't exist. And then we haven't even gotten to them wanting to eliminate Department of Education. I did see some information about the first bill that the Republicans want to put up about student loans, is that student loan forgiveness actually will go to people who make in the range of $300,000 and $400,000 a year, as opposed to the ones making less, because their theory is that those high dollar people don't need to be burdened by loans. If we take it from them, they'll create jobs for these low dollar people so they can pay back their loans. That there is a bill that's probably going to get introduced right away that essentially gives 0% interest on those very high dollar loans for those doctors and lawyers that have really high student loans that had to be repaid, which is the irony that people who could have benefited from Joe Biden's push to reduce student loans are the ones going to be hurt. And then over the months, we're going to talk about a lot of people that will probably be hurt by some of these policies of Donald Trump. One last thing, I don't know if you saw this, Val, and we didn't talk about this, but Mike Tyson fought Jake Paul last night. And one of the reasons why I'm kind of dragging today is like an idiot. I sat up to watch that. Did you watch it? And if you did, what the hell? Why did Mike? I'm sure it was for the payday, but I mean, what the hell was going on there, Val?
I didn't realize he was that broke that he needed to do something this stupid. Because a man that old, almost 60 years old, it's like a 75 or 80-year-old falling down. And the first thing your doctor want to know, have you fallen lately? And this guy's getting punched in the head repeatedly, by
a 27-year-old.
Well, 27. I mean, it is ridiculous. He's going to get concussed. He's going to get all kinds of bad things happening to him at this late stage of his life. There should be a law by the boxing commission that says you cannot enter the ring after XYZ age.
Yeah.
And just cut it off at that.
And not sanction this at all. Yeah. So, but again, it's part of this same sort of cultural thing that we have. UFC is very popular. The people who follow UFC, the Joe Rogans and the Jack Whites are supporters of Donald Trump. It's part of this male, hyper male masculinity culture that they've tried to foist on everybody. So Jake Paul, the person that Tyson fought last night, is a podcaster who's into that all white men are being oppressed kind of bullshit that we've been talking about. But anyway, I just had to ask you about that because I was mad because I stayed up and watched it like an idiot and should have been asleep. Anyway, so before we go, anything we need to know, anything you want to tell me about?
Well, the thing about it is I've been telling people all along before the 5th of November was that go out and vote. I won't start talking about 2026 yet, but I'll say this: do something good for other people and it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Don't get too depressed. Don't get down on yourself. Concentrate on you, your loved ones, and your family. That'll take your mind off of things you shouldn't be thinking about. And tune in again next week for me and Ed.
Yeah, well, that's it. And again, keep telling people about it. We keep picking up subscribers. We could do some other stuff to drive the numbers or whatever. I don't want to get into that stuff. I want us to constantly talk about the real issues in politics but also the real issues in society or whatever. Val's already said it. Go out and do something good for somebody today. I really do mean that. And we'll see you again next time.